So welcome everybody. My name is Erica. I am the Customer Success Manager at ListenWise. And for those that don't know, ListenWise is a listening skills platform with audio stars from NPR and other podcasts. And my main job is to train, onboard, and support teachers. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Mike Messner. So Mike, could you just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name's Mike. I've been using ListenWise in my classroom for the last 3.5 years. I am a high school U.S. history and civics teacher in California in the Bay Area. And so Erica and I are going to be sort of tag teaming today and talking about why ListenWise has some assets that you probably need to incorporate. We're also going to be talking about why teaching current events in an election year is particularly important. So you can see here we're going to be talking about what civic engagement is and what it isn't. We are going to be talking about current event podcasts. I'm going to give you some examples of how I've used ListenWise in my own classroom and how some of my colleagues have. And then we're going to be open for questions. And we will be asking you to think actively and listen actively during the 30 minutes, not quite, that we have together.
Awesome. And do you want to mention, if you don't have a ListenWise account yet, you can go to listenwise.com, sign up for a free teacher account, and then you also have the option to start a 30-day free trial if you want to explore premium features. And as Mike mentioned, if you have questions, comments, etc., use the chat box, and we'll discuss throughout. So hopefully you all join in.
Right you are. Okay, so let's talk about what civic engagement is. Now, we hear this quite a lot. I hear this on the news, and I hear this from concerned parents and administrators and people like that saying, oh, well, we don't have enough civic engagement. Well, what do we mean by that? It's not necessarily being partisan, and it's not necessarily showing up at every meeting in the community and being a gadfly. What it really means for our purposes is the following. It means making a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation, all of those four aspects, not just one or two of them, to make that difference through both political and non-political processes. What we mean also, it is not about going out and campaigning for one particular candidate or party, and it is not about getting your students to go and do that. It's also not about us as teachers telling students what their opinions ought to be, and it's not about engaging in a pitched battle in the classroom about what their views are or should be about what our values are or should be. So there is a difference between civic engagement and just civic busyness, which is what we're talking about today. So why is this important? Well, at the National Association for Educational Progress, and there is a link there on the slide that Erica just put up, less than a quarter of our students are performing at a proficient level when it comes to civics. So it's pretty clear that we have a problem. Okay? What we know is that if you are following the news as a young person, okay, you will be a more active citizen, meaning you're going to be someone who is doing more than simply taking in the news. You're acting on it. You're being in touch with your legislators. You're going to different civic meetings. You're in contact with other people about issues of interest in the community. You're a more regular voter. We've known this for years, that once you have the habit of voting, you don't tend to stop as long as you are still able to go to the polls or able to fill out an absentee form. You will continue voting. And you're more likely to be actively involved in solving community problems rather than just griping about them. You will be, to quote a phrase, part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Okay, so Erica, I think you're going to be playing something for us, and this is from a ListenWise story that came out on National Public Radio about 4.5 months ago. And the whole idea is, in light of a lot of different protests that have been going on for many different reasons. More recently, the climate walkout that we had a few weeks ago. Okay, should that kind of protest be allowed in public spaces? So I think we're going to listen to the first couple of minutes of this, and then we're going to invite people to jump into the chat box here to give us a little bit of feedback on this. Okay, so Erica, if you want to go ahead and hit it.
Roll.
This week, a coalition of well-known advocacy groups sent a letter to Congress. They included the Libertarian Charles Koch Institute and the March for Life, but also the NAACP and the American Civil Liberties Union. The issue that united right and left: new rules proposed by the National Park Service that would impact protests in and around Washington, D.C., think the National Mall and in front of the White House. Now, this letter is on top of more than 70,000 responses the Park Service received during its recent open comment period. To talk more, we're joined by Kate Buon of the ACLU. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Audie. It's wonderful to be here.
What is it about this issue you think that's bringing together such an interesting mix of voices?
I think what brings together such a broad base of people with such diverse views is that the National Mall and the national parks within the National Capital Region are the quintessential place for the freedom of speech in our country. They are where you go to protest. They're where you go to speak directly to your government. And regardless of your point of view, it's available to you to do so.
Help us understand what these rules would look like for an organization that was trying to stage a protest. What would these mean in reality?
Sure, absolutely. So let's take the sort of stealth proposal to close 80% of the White House sidewalk as an example. In our research, we found pictures of women's suffrage activists standing right in front of that fence holding signs requesting the right to vote. And you can draw a line from them straight through to protests for immigration reform not long ago. Closing that particular area, that is where you go to speak directly to the chief executive. If you cannot access that space, your ability to get your message across not just to the president, but to the country itself has been stifled, has been chilled. And another that comes to mind is that there's a proposal that would change the way that they make resources available when spontaneous demonstrations occur. And in this day and age, I find that to be particularly concerning because we get our news more quickly than we ever have in the past. There are far more occasions for the need for spontaneous protests, for spontaneous coming together, for example, for a prayer vigil if a tragedy happens. That raises concerns, obviously First Amendment concerns, but it also raises concerns just about who we are as a people.
Let me jump in here. So,
Okay, great. So that gives us a flavor of what that story would be like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to either type into the text box, and Erica, I think that's open. I'm going to need your help in getting to it. Okay. What did this listening experience offer you as a learner? And I'm going to add something to there, and then I'm going to answer it myself. Okay. As a learner, that a textbook or reading a piece of paper would not offer. And for me, what this offers is a chance for me to visualize the kind of scenery that the reporter and her guest are talking about. That means that I'm going to create my own visualization of it. That means it's going to mean it's going to have more meaning to me as a learner because I'm using my imagination and I'm not being, in some sense, being told what to see or what to think. I'm being told, in effect, to imagine what it is that the reporters are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. It looks like we don't have any responses yet.
Okay.
But,
so I'm okay.
But go ahead.
Okay, so let's give people a few seconds to type in on there. The box that I'm seeing, Erica, says organizers only in the chat box.
That you can only chat to the organizers?
I've got two choices. I can to presenter only or organizers only.
Oh, not to everyone? Shoot. Okay, well, I'm seeing them come through. It looks like you had a couple of comments from Ike, but they were from earlier.
Okay. All right. Well, in the meantime, shall we just go ahead, because we want to honor people's time here.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. So let's move on to the next slide then. Okay. So in a second, I'm going to turn this over to Erica to talk about the different particular applications that current events have, and then I'm going to talk about some ways that it's been used in the classroom. So Erica, you want to take the wheel here?
Yes, thanks, Mike. So we're going to discuss 3 ways to use podcasts. Of course, not mutually exclusive. Some stories can help promote civic engagement in multiple ways. So here are the 3. First up, teaching about civic participation. For students to be informed, responsible people, they have to understand the process, the mechanisms, the organizing principles of government and non-governmental organizations. Podcasts are an accessible medium to foster students' understandings of these topics and can assist teachers in addressing these topics. Second, deepening understanding of civic issues. So inviting students to think critically and empathetically about a variety of contemporary issues and diverse perspectives featured in these current events can help to prepare for active citizenship. Podcasts can be integrated into lessons to invite students to think critically about relevant contemporary issues, such as whether the voting age should be lowered or whether mosquitoes should be genetically modified to self-destruct. They can be motivated to think about their roles and responsibilities as citizens, including their roles in being critical consumers of social media, and potentially being encouraged to affect positive change in the world by learning from examples like NFL players speaking out publicly about issues that matter to them. And lastly, inspiring civic action. So featured stories about individuals who have taken action to make a positive difference in their communities can provide models that spark students' own ideas about what they can do to improve the world around them. And lessons incorporating podcasts can engage students in considering issues that might affect them, such as bullying or how they can take action to address those issues. They could act at the local level, for example, to protect the environment by creating urban habitats for monarch butterflies. They may learn about students engaging in national efforts, such as protesting gun violence, or global efforts, such as influencing the straw debate. So let's dive in a little bit more here. So current events. Becoming a global citizen starts with understanding the world. And the best way to understand the world is to follow the news of the world in a way that is relevant and timely. In this context, students can see how interconnected we all are across time and place. They can help students view themselves as global citizens whose actions can have an impact locally or globally. And current events relate to a range of subjects, including social studies, ELA, and science. And teaching current events supports students' engagement overall. A large body of research supports the use of current events as teaching tools. And students tend to score higher on standardized achievement tests than those who don't use them. Using newspapers or podcasts helps students become effective readers. It improves their vocabulary, word recognition, comprehension. And using newspapers and other news sources increase students' awareness of national and world events. And audio stories can be used to address a wide variety of curriculum standards. So listening comprehension, other Common Core literacy skills, along with ELA, social studies, science standards. They can also help students, including English learners, build academic language, background knowledge, and supporting social and emotional learning and civic engagement. In a highly polarized time, listening skills can help develop empathy, compassion, shared understanding that are vital to civic discourse and reasoned thinking. Listening skills allow us to tap into our shared experiences rather than focusing on our differences. And want to note that one of the benefits of using podcasts as instructional materials is that they equalize learning access to engaging academic content for all learners, including English language learners and struggling or reluctant readers ListenWise Premium has many built-in supports, so interactive transcripts and other supports that help ensure that all learners can access the same high-quality texts. Speaking of ListenWise, just want to talk about how ListenWise is a great resource to teach current events and bring all those audio stories into your classroom. So our library has about 1,900 stories right now, so mainly from NPR and other podcast partnerships, grades 5 to 12 and up. And ListenWise, it's powered by the best storytellers, so real-world stories, like we just heard a little bit ago from trusted names in journalism. It's all created for classroom use, and with a premium subscription, you also get auto-scored quizzes, interactive transcripts, and other supports, as I mentioned. And as I mentioned, you can sign up for an account now if you don't have one yet, and you can also opt into that 30-day free trial if you want to explore more premium options. So now, with that background, I'm going to pass it back to Mike, and he's going to give some examples of how he's taught this.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the top of the webcast, I am a civics teacher, and I need to tell kids more than just the facts. I need to get them to participate and to prepare to participate in the most fundamental way that we have to participate in our democracy, which is to vote. And so the nice thing about ListenWise is that it does have stories about things that are really integral to knowing about what a citizen is and what a citizen has to do in order to earn and maintain that title, rather than just a news consumer or an observer or a bystander. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're not going to play this, but I did want to let you know we did have a chance last spring to use this because we were just coming off the midterm elections, and although that was a time when a lot of people did go to the polls because they had very strong feelings about a number of issues, we still had and have a problem of voter apathy, why people don't in fact vote. So the way that I spun this was that I played the podcast twice. The first time I asked my students not to take any notes, not to have anything distracting, not even put their heads down on the desk, just to sit and listen. Then I played it a second time, and I had this prompt, among others, up on the screen, and I asked the kids to think about what they would say to one of the people in this story who chose not to vote. There were a number of people that were interviewed, and they said things like, "I'm only one person, my vote doesn't count, the people are too rich, they're never going to do anything," and excuses that I'm sure you have heard either online or perhaps from real people about why they don't vote, because we still have a situation in our country where 2/3 of eligible voters don't go to the polls or don't turn in an absentee ballot. So let's go to the next one here. Okay. I'm also interested in people knowing more than just the facts. I want them to think a lot about contemporary issues and to take in different perspectives. I think it probably goes without saying in education today that it is all about different perspectives, not simply listening to the sage on the stage and taking what he or she has to say as gospel truth. Okay, what are the perspectives that are going to prepare you to operate in a world that is becoming ever more diverse and ever more varying, even in a time of polarization? There is more and more diversity, and we're seeing more of that, even if it's not obvious at first glance with our political opinion. So a good example of that, let's get that up there, would be talking about the same story we played a little while ago. Should public protest be restricted? And the way I used that was the climate change walkout. Now, we had a number of students at my school, Los Altos High School, walk out. What we were told by the administration is that they were free to do so, but they would not have excused absences. And that was part of the discussion that we had. And another part of it was, if it was going to be allowed, should specific parameters have been used on it? After all, the majority of the students that were walking out were not legal adults. They did not have the right to vote, and they were supposed to be on campus and in class. So should they have been told something like, well, you can go on campus, but you can't go here, or you can go off campus to go to City Hall, but you can't go someplace else? That was another part of the discussion. And so it was not simply a case of should it have been allowed, although that was the thing that we led off with. Most of my students believed it should have been allowed, and so we were able to build on that. Okay, let's go to the next one, please, Erica. And then stories about individuals who've taken action to make a difference in their community, to act in the area directly around them. We're dealing with young people, we're dealing with individuals. By him or herself, one person probably cannot save the world, but they can make an immediate impact in the area where they are living and where they are working and where they are going to school. And the example that we use came from something that sadly we are all having to deal with in this country, and that is school shootings. Now, if you are listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, well, my school, something like that could never happen at my school, I dare say that the people at Sandy Hook, the people at Columbine, the people at Virginia Tech, the people in Parkland, Florida, probably felt the same way, even if they didn't say the same thing. So putting that aside for the moment, okay, the students there began a movement that is still going on and that is growing, so that we are becoming more aware of this and we are doing more proactively, not simply to run, hide, and defend, but to reach out to students who are hurting, reach out to students who are angry, reach out to students that are fearful, so that we can show them that they are not forgotten and that they don't have to resort to the kind of action that was taken at the places I've just mentioned. So that's another aspect of what ListenWise is able to do for civic education.
Awesome.
Okay, so as far as lesson planning, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask another question here, and Erica, you can see some of these responses, but I would like people to at least think about this, okay? How might you use audio stories to teach civic engagement during the upcoming election year, even if your curriculum doesn't specifically touch on politics? So what I want you to think about as you're considering that question, okay, are the things that are down there, okay? How do you express your opinion while leaving room for people with other viewpoints? In other words, how are we refraining from imposing our views? How do we engage when we don't have all the answers? Is it okay for us to say we don't know? How do you seek out or listen to those who have different beliefs from our own? Now, that is maybe the most challenging for a lot of us, because we do tend, as Americans in this day and age, we do tend to listen only to sides that agree with us more than sides that are different from us. But it's something that if you walk away from this today, what I want you to do is to think about that question that's in that sort of orange background. And I don't want you, and before you say, well, I can't use audio stories, I would urge you to take a look at the things that ListenWise has to offer and the kind of ways that you can plug it into your ELA classroom, your science classroom, your social studies classroom. And if you're an elementary teacher, you're not left out. You're going to have opportunities to do that starting in January, where we start putting out podcast materials for the elementary audience. So that is what I'd like to leave you with in terms of consideration for this afternoon. Okay, Erica, let's get the next slide up here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so very briefly, and these slides will be available to you afterwards, but there are ways to promote civic engagement, just like we've talked about, including the stories that I've given you today. Learning about media literacy and fake news, particularly with Facebook being in the news, okay? Is Facebook going to continue to allow news stories that are verifiably not true? Do we have a community and a classroom culture where you can have a civil discourse rather than an argument? In some areas that will be more difficult than others. And what are the current events? There's one for every weekday that ListenWise puts up, and it happens within hours of it actually being reduced by National Public Radio. So those links are there for you. We decided we didn't want to overwhelm you with pages and pages full of hyperlinks, but you can look at these on your own time.
Yeah, and actually, sneak peek at next Monday's current event. We're obviously already thinking about the 2020 election, and as Mike mentioned, we're following the action. So Monday's story, it's already the 4th of November next week, I think. So check out this story.
What a coincidence.
I know, isn't it great?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Sneak peek in there. And then a bunch of resources. We can open it up for questions. I know there are a couple of comments in the box, but then as Mike mentioned, we also, we will also in the slides have a bunch of other stories you can use to address those thoughts and questions as well. So you'll all get the slides after. And then let me just go through here and see comments, questions. Ike was asking, he doesn't know how to podcast. Does ListenWise do podcasting? So we actually do have podcasting guides for teachers if you do want to explore that, which is a great way to get students engaged. They can interview people. They can podcast about their own thoughts. So that's a wonderful way to bring students into the discussion. And then ListenWise, he was asking if there's scaffolding. There are EL scaffolds. And if you explore ListenWise Premium, and you'll see the scaffolding like when we were watching the transcript play for that story we were listening to earlier. That's one of the supports as well. And let's see if we have anything else here. And then I just mentioned to the question we posed at the end, you just said it's challenging and hard to integrate these issues without attending groups in class. So it's always something to think
about. It certainly can be, yes. Mm-hmm.
So that was one of his comments. And one question about getting a certificate for attendance. Ike, yes, if you email me after, and I can get your email address, and I can give you some of that follow-up information, but we can touch base on that.
All right. Well, thank you for those of you that were able to make it. And this is part of a series that we're going to be doing. And so thank you, Erica, for setting this up. And we'll see everybody down the road. God bless you, and have a great end of your October and beginning of November.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Mike.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.